I watched my sister's face turn the exact shade of a boiled lobster as the photographer adjusted his camera lens. We were standing on the red carpet of the Sundance Film Festival, and Meredith's carefully applied foundation was literally melting off her face under the brutal glare of the winter sun reflecting off the snow. "Do you have sunglasses?" she hissed at me, squinting so hard she looked like she was in pain. I smiled, feeling the weight of my designer glacier glasses, specially made for extreme UV reflection, worth $3,000 resting comfortably on my face. "No, sorry, these are prescription. They won't work for you." It was a lie. They weren't prescription. But she didn't need to know that. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Just for the photos. I can't see anything. Everything's white." The photographer was getting impatient. Behind Meredith, I could see the head of the studio that had just signed me to direct their next major documentary about climate change in the Arctic. He was watching this exchange with interest. "I really can't," said us, my voice steady and kind, even sympathetic. "Last time I lent you sunglasses, I never got them back, remember?" Her face went from red to purple. Because she did remember. She remembered all of it. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that I remembered even more. I remembered dying. Let me take you back to where this really started. Not to this moment of petty revenge on a red carpet, but to 6 years ago when I was 24 years old and stupid enough to still love my family. It was July in Southern California and the heat was murderous. I was working double shifts at a beachside cafe, saving every penny for graduate school applications. My degree in environmental science had gotten me exactly nowhere, and I was desperate to get into a master's program that might actually lead to a career. Meredith had just graduated from UCLA with a communications degree that our parents paid for in full. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for my state school education while living at home and giving mom and dad rent money. Meredith had lived in a luxury apartment near campus, drove a new Audi, and came home every weekend with bags of designer clothes. "Sweetie, can I borrow your sunglasses?" Meredith asked that morning, barging into my room without knocking. She was wearing a white bikini that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe and holding her phone in one hand, car keys in the other. I was studying for the GRE, surrounded by practice books and flashcards, exhausted from my closing shift the night before. "Which ones?" I asked, even though I knew. "The Oakley ones, the polarized ones, they're perfect for the beach." Those sunglasses had been a gift from my grandmother before she died. She'd noticed me squinting on our last visit to the beach together, seen me shading my eyes with my hand. "A girl who wants to study the environment needs to be able to see it clearly," she'd said, pressing the expensive case into my hands. They were the nicest thing I owned. "I need them for work," I said. "Adison, the sun off the water gives me migraines." "Oh, come on." Meredith rolled her eyes. "You're working inside. I'm going to Malibu with the girls. It's for the Instagram shots, please." "I'll give them back tonight." She wouldn't, though. Every time she borrowed them, they came back scratched, or with a broken arm that I had to pay to fix, or they didn't come back at all until I asked for them multiple times. "Meredith, no, not this time." Her face changed. The sweetness disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. "You're so fucking selfish. After everything mom and dad do for you, letting you live here for basically nothing." "I pay rent," I interrupted Matson. $500 a month. "Oh, please, that's nothing. This house is worth $2 million. They could be renting your room out for twice that." She was wrong, of course. Market rate for my tiny room with no attached bathroom would have been about what I was paying. But Meredith had never bothered to learn the actual value of things. Why would she? Everything had always been given to her. "The answer is no," I said firmly. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something cold and calculating flash across her face. Then she smiled. "Fine, whatever, I'll buy my own." She left, slamming my door hard enough to knock one of my textbooks off the shelf. I should have known then. I should have recognized that look. The sunglasses disappeared a week later. I tore my room apart looking for them. I checked everywhere, my car, my gym bag, the cafe, lost and found. They were just gone. I saw them a month after that in one of Meredith's Instagram posts. She was at Coachella, wearing them in a photo with some minor celebrity. The caption read, "Vintage vibes, hashtag blessed, hashtag nice, festival style." When I confronted her, she said she'd found them in the garage. "They were just sitting there. I thought you'd thrown them away or something." "Don't be so dramatic. They're just sunglasses." But they weren't just sunglasses. They were the last gift from someone who'd loved me. Someone who'd seen me, really seen me, in a way my parents never had. I asked for them back. She said she'd lost them. That was the pattern I would learn. Meredith wanted what I had, not because she actually wanted it, but because I had it. My grandmother had left me a small amount of money in her will, $10,000, enough for a year of graduate school tuition. My parents had been furious. "She left me out entirely," my mother had sobbed. "Her own daughter, and she gives money to the grandchildren?" "It's not fair," my father had said, looking at me with undisguised resentment. "We took care of her when she was sick. We visited her every week, and she leaves you both the same amount when Meredith has so many more expenses." Meredith had burned through her $10,000 in a month. Designer bags, a trip to Europe, a down payment on an even more expensive car. "You should help your sister," my mother had said when Meredith's checking account hit zero. "That's what family does." I'd given her $2,000, money I'd been saving for application fees, for a future I was desperately trying to build. Meredith had promised to pay me back. She never did. The sunglasses were just the beginning. That summer was the worst of my life. Or I thought it was, until the summer ended. I finally got enough money together to apply to graduate programs. I applied to 5 schools, all with strong environmental science programs. I spent weeks on my personal statements, had my essays reviewed by 3 different professors, paid for expedited transcripts. The applications cost over $1,000 in fees alone. I got into 4 out of 5 schools. My first choice, a prestigious program at Stanford, offered me a spot with partial funding. I was ecstatic. I was finally getting out. I was finally going to have the life I dreamed about. "That's amazing, honey," my mother said when I told her at dinner. Then she turned to Meredith. "Did you hear that? Your sister got into Stanford." Meredith had been pushing food around her plate, barely listening. She looked up and I saw it again. That cold flash of something ugly. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "We're very proud," my father added, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Of course, Stanford is very expensive, even with partial funding." "I can take out loans," I said quickly. I've been researching it. I can work part-time and, actually," Meredith interrupted. "I've been meaning to tell you guys, I got an internship at a production company in Hollywood." The conversation pivoted immediately. Suddenly, dinner was about Meredith's unpaid internship, about how this was her big break, about how she'd need money for professional clothes and networking events and an apartment closer to the city. My Stanford acceptance was forgotten before we finished the main course. A week later, my laptop was stolen from my room. "Are you sure you didn't just misplace it?" my mother asked when I reported it. I was sure. I was meticulous about my belongings because I had so few of them. The laptop had been on my desk when I left for work. When I came home, it was gone. "Maybe someone broke in," I suggested. My father checked the doors and windows. "Everything's locked. Nothing else is missing. You probably left it at work or in your car." I knew I hadn't. That laptop had everything on it: my Stanford acceptance email, my research notes, the draft of my thesis proposal, my GRE study materials, photos of my grandmother. I filed a police report, but nothing came of it. I had to buy a new laptop with money I didn't have, using a credit card I'd been trying not to touch. I had to contact Stanford and request another copy of all my acceptance materials. I had to reconstruct months of work from memory and backed up notes that were scattered and incomplete. It set me back. More than that, it exhausted me. I was working 60 hours a week between 2 jobs, trying to save money for my move to Stanford, trying to rebuild my academic life, trying to hold myself together. And then, in August, 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave for Stanford, Meredith came into my room crying. "I fucked up," she sobbed. "I fucked up so bad." She'd been embezzling from her internship. Small amounts at first, taking 20s from petty cash, putting personal expenses on the company card, then larger amounts. She'd been caught. They were threatening to prosecute. "I'll go to jail," she wailed. "My whole life will be ruined. Please, you have to help me." The amount she needed to pay back was $8,000. I had $9,000 in my savings account. Everything I'd scraped together for my first quarter at Stanford, for books and rent and food. "I can't," I said. "Meredith, I'm sorry, but I can't. That's all the money I have." "Please," she grabbed my hands. "You're my sister. You're the only one who can help me. Mom and Dad don't have liquid cash right now. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll get a job, a real job. Just please." My parents backed her up, of course. "Family helps family," my mother said. "Stanford will still be there. You can defer a year, work a little more, save up again." "But I can't defer the funding," I said desperately. "If I don't start this fall, I lose the scholarship money. I'll have to pay full tuition if I reapply." "Then reapply," my father said, as if it were that simple. "Your sister needs you now. What's more important, some school or keeping your sister out of jail?" I gave her the money. All of it. $8,000. I kept $1,000 for myself, told Stanford I needed to defer for a year due to family circumstances, and went back to my double shifts at the cafe. Meredith promised, swore, vowed on our grandmother's grave that she'd pay me back by Christmas. By Christmas, she'd moved into a luxury apartment in West Hollywood and was posting photos of herself at exclusive clubs. When I asked about the money, she got angry. "I'm networking, son," she said. "This is an investment in my career. I can't pay you back if I don't make the right connections." God, you're so short-sighted. I reapplied to Stanford that winter. I didn't get in the second time. The admissions officer was sympathetic but clear. They'd offered me a spot once, and I'd deferred for non-medical reasons. That had been my chance. I was devastated. I was also broke. The credit card debt from replacing my laptop was crushing me. I was 25 years old, working 2 minimum wage jobs, living in my parents' house, watching my younger sister live the life I should have had. And then something strange started happening. I started getting sick, tired all the time, dizzy spells, nausea. I thought it was stress at first, or maybe depression, but it got worse. By April, I was so weak I could barely get through a shift without needing to sit down. "You look terrible," my manager said finally. "Go to a doctor, seriously." I didn't have health insurance. I'd aged out of my parents' plan, and the cafe didn't offer benefits. I couldn't afford to go to a doctor. But when I collapsed at work one day, they called an ambulance. I woke up in the emergency room to a doctor with a very serious expression telling me I had acute kidney failure. "Have you been taking any medications?" she asked. "Supplements? Anything unusual?" I hadn't. I couldn't afford medication even when I needed it. They ran more tests, and finally, a toxicology screen. "Someone's been poisoning you," the doctor said quietly. "Slow poisoning. Antifreeze, we think, based on the ethylene glycol levels in your blood. Small doses over several months." I laughed. Actually laughed. Because it was absurd. Who would poison me? I was nobody. I had nothing. But I wasn't nobody to Meredith. I pieced it together in that hospital bed, hooked up to a dialysis machine, my kidneys failing, my body shutting down, my water bottle. I always kept a water bottle by my bed, always drank from it throughout the night. It sat on my nightstand in my room, in my parents' house where my sister lived. The laptop. She'd taken it because my Stanford acceptance letter was on it. Evidence I'd wanted to erase. The money. She'd never needed it to pay back the company. She'd wanted me broke, wanted me stuck, wanted me unable to leave. The sunglasses, such a small thing. But it was never about the sunglasses. It was about taking away anything that was mine, anything that represented someone who loved me more than they loved her. She was jealous. Had always been jealous. Jealous that our grandmother had seen something in me worth nurturing. Jealous that I'd gotten into Stanford on my own merit when she'd barely graduated from UCLA despite every advantage. jealous that I had worked for everything I had, which somehow made those things more valuable than everything that had been handed to her. She wanted me gone, not just gone from the house, gone from existence. Dead. I tried to tell the doctor my suspicions. She listened sympathetically and said they'd have to report it to the police. But I had no proof. My sister had been careful, and when the police came to question my family, they all looked shocked, horrified, concerned. "This is ridiculous," my mother said. "Why would Meredith want to hurt her sister? They're so close." "Maybe it was an accident," my father suggested. "Some kind of environmental contamination? The house is old." They tested the house. No contamination. They tested my water bottle, but it was clean. Meredith had been smart enough to stop once I was hospitalized. Meredith came to visit me once. She brought flowers and sat by my bed with tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," she said. "It's so awful, but you're going to get better, right?" She looked me right in the eyes when she said it. And I knew she'd done it, and she knew I knew. But there was no proof. There was never going to be proof. I died 3 weeks later. My kidneys never recovered. I was too far down the donor transplant list. Dialysis was keeping me alive, but barely. And then one day, my body just gave up. I was 25 years old. I died in a hospital bed alone because my family had stopped visiting after the first week. "Too depressing," my mother said. The last thing I saw was the ceiling tiles of the hospital room. And then I woke up. I was 13 years old again. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, sunlight streaming through the window, my alarm clock blaring the same pop song I'd loved in middle school. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all. The cafe, Stanford, the hospital, dying. But I hadn't. The memories were too vivid, too real. I could still feel the weakness in my body, the nausea, the betrayal. I sat up and looked at my hands. Young hands, 13-year-old hands. My phone buzzed, an old iPhone model that I'd forgotten I'd owned. A text from a friend about homework. The date on the screen confirmed it, July 15th, 2012. I'd gone back 12 years. I sat there for a long time, processing. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But it was. Somehow, impossibly, I'd been given another chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. The first thing I did was think, really think. I had 12 years of knowledge about what was coming. I knew how cryptocurrency would boom. I knew which stocks would skyrocket. I knew about climate patterns, natural disasters, political shifts. I knew which companies would fail and which would thrive. But more importantly, I knew about my family. I knew what Meredith would become, what she would do. This time, things would be different. The first change I made was subtle. When my grandmother came to visit that summer, I spent every possible moment with her. I asked her about her life, her youth, her dreams. I told her about my own dreams, specifically my dream of studying climate science in the Arctic. "Alaska?" she said, surprised. "That's very specific, darling." "The Arctic is where climate change is most visible," I said, using knowledge from my undergraduate studies that I hadn't even taken yet. "The permafrost is melting. Ice cores tell us about historical climate patterns. If we want to understand what's happening to the planet, we need to study the extremes." My grandmother's eyes lit up. "You've really thought about this." "It's all I think about," I said. And it was true in a way. I'd spent years studying environmental science in my first life. It had been my passion before Meredith had crushed it out of me. "Then you should do it," my grandmother said firmly. "When you're old enough, you should go. Study the Arctic. Make a difference." She died 8 months later, just like before. But this time, her will was different. This time, she left me $20,000, double what she'd left me in my first life. And she'd left instructions. The money was to be held in a trust until I turned 18, specifically for education. It couldn't be touched by anyone else. Couldn't be borrowed against, couldn't be taken. My parents were furious, but there was nothing they could do. My grandmother's lawyer had been very thorough. Meredith, who'd gotten the same $10,000 as before, was livid. "Why does she get more?" she demanded at the will reading. Because she asked about her grandmother's life, the lawyer said dryly. She spent time with her. She showed interest in actually following through on her dreams. Your grandmother wanted to support that. I said nothing. I just smiled. The next few years, I played the long game. I was careful. I didn't want to change so much that I made myself a target too early. I stayed quiet, studious, unremarkable. I got good grades, but not suspiciously better than before. I worked part-time jobs and saved money. I researched universities with Arctic research programs. And I watched Meredith. In my first life, I'd been oblivious to her machinations until it was too late. This time, I saw everything. I saw how she copied my homework and claimed she'd done it herself. I saw how she stole my clothes and accessories and then gaslit me about it. I saw how she manipulated our parents, playing the victim whenever I tried to establish boundaries. But I also saw something I'd missed the first time. She wasn't actually talented at anything. Without stealing my work, copying my ideas, riding my coattails, she was mediocre, average, unremarkable. She'd built her entire identity on being better than me, and the only way she could do that was by tearing me down. Not this time. When I turned 18, I immediately applied to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. They had one of the best Arctic research programs in the country, and more importantly, they were 3,000 miles away from Southern California. Alaska? My mother said, horrified. Why would you want to go there? It's so far away. It's where the research is, I said calmly. But there are good schools here, my father argued. UCLA, USC. You could stay close to home. Help your sister. She's struggling with her applications. She was struggling because she'd been counting on copying my essays like she had for every other school assignment. But I hadn't written any essays yet. I'd done all my applications during lunch periods at school, on library computers where she couldn't access them. I'm going to Alaska, I said firmly. I got in with a full scholarship plus a research assistant position that would cover living expenses. I used some of my grandmother's trust money to buy gear, proper cold weather, equipment, a good laptop with encrypted storage, a phone with fingerprint locks that Meredith couldn't access. I left in August, right after graduation. I didn't look back. College in Alaska was everything I'd hoped for. The program was rigorous, the research was groundbreaking, and I was finally away from my family. I thrived. Without the constant drain of Meredith's theft and manipulation, without my parents' demands for money and sacrifice, I could focus entirely on my studies. I worked hard, published papers, assisted on major research projects. My professors loved me. I was building the career I'd dreamed of, and I kept a low profile with my family. I called home once a month, kept the conversations brief and pleasant. I posted occasionally on social media but kept my accounts private. I didn't share details about my research or my achievements. As far as my family knew, I was doing fine, but nothing spectacular. Meanwhile, back in California, Meredith was following the same path as my first life. She'd gotten into UCLA, barely, and was studying communications. She was burning through money, partying constantly, barely passing her classes. I watched from a distance through mutual friends' social media. Part of me felt guilty for not warning my parents about what was coming. But I remembered my hospital bed. I remembered dying alone. And I reminded myself that they'd chosen her over and over again. They'd sacrificed me for her comfort without hesitation. They'd made their choice. Now they'd live with the consequences. When I was 21, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in environmental science, focus on Arctic climatology. I immediately started a master's program at the same university, fully funded. I was working with one of the leading researchers in permafrost degradation, and our work was getting attention from major scientific journals. I was also making money, not from my research, graduate stipends are notoriously small, but from investments. I'd used my grandmother's trust money wisely, investing in companies I knew would explode. Amazon, Apple, Bitcoin at the right moment, Tesla. I was careful, diversified, smart. By the time I was 22, I had over $200,000 in investment accounts. I bought a small house in Fairbanks. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Actually mine, no roommates, no family members who could steal from me or sabotage me. I had a home office where I could work in peace. I had a life that was entirely my own. And then, that summer, my phone rang. It was my mother. She was crying. "You need to come home," she said. "It's Meredith. She's in trouble." The story was exactly what I'd expected because I'd lived it before, just from the other side. Meredith had been embezzling from her internship. She'd been caught. She needed $8,000 to avoid prosecution. "Can you help?" my mother begged. "You're doing so well up there. Surely you have some savings?" I did. I had substantially more than some savings, but I also remembered lying in a hospital bed, poisoned, dying, while my family worried more about appearances than about me. "No," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, I can't help. I have student loans to pay off and research expenses and—" "Don't lie to me," my mother snapped. "I know you have that money from Grandma's trust. You can help your sister." "That money is for my education," I said calmly. "It's in a trust specifically for that purpose. I can't just withdraw it for personal expenses." This was a lie. I'd gotten full control of the trust when I turned 21. But they didn't need to know that. "She's your sister," my father said, having taken the phone. "She'll go to jail. Is that what you want? For your own sister to go to jail?" I thought about it for a moment, genuinely thought about it. Dad, I said finally, "has Meredith ever helped me? Even once? When I needed money for textbooks, did she help? When I was working 2 jobs to pay rent while living at home, did she offer to pay her own way? When I—" "That's different," he interrupted. "You're older. You're supposed to help her." "I'm 1 year older, and somehow I managed to not embezzle from my employers. That's a choice she made. She needs to face the consequences." I hung up. They called back 17 times. I didn't answer. Eventually, they gave up. I found out later through Facebook that my parents had remortgaged their house to pay Meredith's debt. They'd also paid for a lawyer who got her a plea deal, probation, and community service instead of jail time. Meredith graduated from UCLA 6 months late and moved back home. According to her Instagram, she was taking time to find herself and focusing on wellness and healing. According to my sources, old high school friends who still lived nearby, she was unemployed, living in my old room and spending her days shopping online with our parents' credit cards. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sympathy, no satisfaction, just relief that I was 3,000 miles away. I was 23 when I got my master's degree. My thesis on accelerated permafrost degradation and its impact on global methane release won several awards and was published in Nature. Suddenly, I wasn't just another graduate student. I was someone people in my field knew about. I started getting offers, postdoc positions, research grants, consulting opportunities with environmental organizations. I chose to pursue a PhD while also doing consulting work on the side. The consulting paid exceptionally well. Companies wanted to understand climate risk, and I could tell them exactly what was coming based on both my research and my foreknowledge of the next decade. By 25, the age I'd died in my first life, I had a PhD in progress, 3 major published papers, and was making 6 figures from consulting work. I'd paid off all my educational debt. My investment portfolio had grown to over $1 million. I bought a better house. Still in Fairbanks, but larger, newer, with a view of the forest. I got a dog, a beautiful Malamute named Ghost. I dated occasionally, but I was focused on my career. I was building something real, something no one could take from me. My family still called occasionally. My mother would cry about how much she missed me, how I never came home. My father would make passive-aggressive comments about how I'd abandoned them. Meredith never called at all. I went home for Christmas once when I was 26. It was a mistake. The house looked shabby, worn down. My parents had aged badly, stress and financial problems taking their toll. Meredith was still living at home, working sporadically as a social media manager for small local businesses. She'd gained weight and lost the glossy, polished look she'd cultivated in college. "Look at you," my mother said when I arrived, and there was something brittle in her voice. "So successful, so independent. Must be nice." "It's nice to see you too, Mom," I said carefully. Dinner was awkward. My parents asked questions about my work that felt more like interrogations. How much was I making? Why hadn't I sent money home? Didn't I care about family? Meredith barely spoke to me. She just stared, and I recognized that look. that cold, calculating look. She was still jealous, still hateful. And if I gave her the opportunity, she'd still try to destroy me. I left after 2 days, claiming I needed to get back for work. I didn't visit again. When I was 27, my career exploded. A documentary filmmaker had read my papers and wanted to make a film about Arctic climate research. She followed me for 6 months, filming my fieldwork, my interviews with indigenous communities affected by permafrost melt, my testimony at environmental conferences. The documentary Frozen Warning premiered at Sundance and won the Audience Award. Suddenly, I wasn't just known in academic circles, I was famous. Climate activists were sharing my interviews. Major news outlets were calling for commentary. I was invited to speak at the United Nations, and I was asked to consult on a major Hollywood film about climate change. The pay was obscene, $500,000 for 3 months of work. I said yes. This meant going back to Los Angeles, back to Southern California, back to where my family lived. I knew it would be complicated. I just didn't know how complicated. The film production put me up in a luxury hotel in Beverly Hills. I had a car service, an expense account, a level of treatment I'd never experienced. I was also required to attend various industry events, screenings, parties, networking dinners. It was at one of these events that I ran into Meredith. She was working there, not as a guest, as a server, passing around champagne flutes to people who barely acknowledged her existence. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched her face cycle through shock, disbelief, rage, and finally something like despair. She cornered me by the bathrooms 20 minutes later. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Working," I said calmly. "I'm consulting on the film." "You?" She laughed, but it was ugly. "They hired you?" "They hired my expertise, yes." "Your expertise?" she repeated mockingly. "Little Miss Perfect. Living in Alaska, pretending to be some kind of scientist, and now you're... What, you're some kind of celebrity?" "I'm not a celebrity. I'm a climate researcher. The documentary brought attention to my work." "Of course it did. Of course. Everything works out for you, doesn't it? You leave, you abandon your family, and somehow you end up with everything you ever wanted." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was 32 years old, but looked older. Her face was hard, lined with bitterness. She was wearing a server's uniform that didn't fit quite right. Her hair, once glossy and expensively maintained, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Meredith," I said quietly, "what exactly did I take from you?" "Are you serious?" Her voice rose and people were starting to look. "You took everything. Grandma's money, your fancy education, your whole perfect life. While I'm here, serving drinks to assholes who won't even look at me." "I took nothing from you," I said, keeping my voice level. "Grandma gave me that money because I spent time with her, because I showed interest in her life. You got the same amount initially, you just burned through it in a month. My education was earned through scholarships and hard work. My career exists because I built it year by year. None of that had anything to do with you." "Bullshit. You always thought you were better than me." "I never thought that. But you always needed to be better than me. And when you couldn't be, you tried to drag me down instead." Her face went pale, then red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." We stared at each other for a long moment, and I saw it, the knowledge in her eyes. She knew I knew. She'd always known, but here's what she didn't know. She couldn't hurt me anymore. I was too far away, too successful, too protected. She had no power over me. "Stay away from me," she said finally. "Stay away from my family." "Your family?" I raised an eyebrow. "They're my family too, but don't worry, I have no intention of coming around. I learned that lesson a long time ago." I walked away and I didn't look back. The film was a massive success. It premiered a year later and was nominated for multiple awards. My consulting work led to more opportunities, more films, more documentaries, a book deal. I wrote a book about my research, about climate change in the Arctic, about what we stood to lose. It became a bestseller. I was on talk shows, giving TED Talks, advising policymakers. And through it all, I lived in Alaska. I kept my home in Fairbanks. I did my fieldwork in the remote Arctic. I stayed as far from Southern California as I could get. My parents tried to reconnect once my success became undeniable. They called, sent emails, showed up in comment sections of articles about me claiming to be so proud of their daughter. I ignored them. I'd learned that lesson too. But Meredith couldn't let it go. It started small. Comments on my social media from fake accounts claiming I'd plagiarized my research, that I'd slept my way into opportunities, that I was a fraud. I ignored them. Then she started contacting my colleagues, sending emails claiming I'd stolen her ideas, that we'd worked on projects together and I'd taken credit. Most people ignored her. My publication record spoke for itself. But it was annoying, distracting. Then she escalated. She sold a story to a tabloid. It was full of lies, claiming I'd abandoned my sick parents, that I'd stolen from my family, that I was a narcissist who'd cut off everyone who'd ever loved me. The story didn't get much traction. My actual reputation was too solid, and the tabloid wasn't particularly reputable. But it was out there, floating around the internet, occasionally resurfacing when people searched my name. I could have sued her. I had the money for lawyers. But I had a better idea. I called the documentary filmmaker who'd made Frozen Warning. "I have a story for you," I said, "about family, jealousy, and attempted murder." The second documentary was called Borrowed Sunglasses. It was about my life. I told everything. My first life, the stolen laptop, the embezzlement, the coerced loan, the poisoning, my death. My second life, my rebirth with memories intact, my escape to Alaska, my rebuilt career. I had no proof of the poisoning, of course. In this timeline, it hadn't happened. But I told the story anyway, framed as my memories of a previous life, a warning about toxic family dynamics and the cost of enabling abusive behavior. I didn't name Meredith directly. I didn't have to. Anyone who knew my family would recognize the story. The filmmaker was skeptical at first about the rebirth angle. "People won't believe it," she said. "They don't have to believe the supernatural part," I said. "They just have to see the pattern. A talented woman constantly sabotaged by her jealous sister and unsupportive parents. Whether I actually died and came back, or whether I just had a realization and changed my life, the message is the same. Sometimes you have to leave toxic people behind, even if they're family." The documentary premiered at Sundance. That's where we are now, where this story began. On the red carpet with Meredith squinting against the sun, begging for my sunglasses. She'd come to Sundance hoping to network, to revive her dead career by proximity to mine. She'd crashed the premiere, talked her way past security by claiming to be my sister, and now she was standing here, melting under the intensity of the sun reflecting off the snow, unable to keep her eyes open for photos because she hadn't prepared properly. Because she'd never had to prepare properly. She'd always just taken what she needed from other people. "Please," she said one more time, her voice breaking, "just for 5 minutes." I looked at her. I thought about 13-year-old me, grateful for my grandmother's gift, 24-year-old me, dying in a hospital, 27-year-old me, successful and happy and finally free. "No," I said simply. "Mum, buy your own sunglasses, Meredith." The photographer got impatient and moved on to the next arrivals. Meredith stumbled away from the carpet, her eyes streaming tears, from the sun or from humiliation, I couldn't tell. Didn't care. I walked into the theater with my head high, my glacier glasses protecting my eyes from the brutal glare of snow and sun. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation, people asking who that was, why she'd been so unprepared. The documentary screened to a sold-out crowd. There were gasps during the poisoning section, applause during the scenes of my Arctic research. And at the end, when the credits rolled over footage of me in my Fairbanks home, ghost curled at my feet, my shelves lined with awards and published papers, when the final title card read, "Sometimes the best revenge is surviving," the audience rose to their feet. The aftermath was everything I could have hoped for. The documentary won the Grand Jury Prize. It was picked up by a major streaming platform for distribution. Within a week, it was trending globally. The response was overwhelming. Survivors of family abuse contacted me, sharing their own stories. Mental health professionals wrote articles about narcissistic family dynamics. Climate activists love the narrative of someone overcoming personal obstacles to do crucial environmental work. And my family was exposed. I still hadn't named them directly in the film, but it didn't matter. Journalists did their research. Within days, articles were identifying my parents and sister, detailing their financial problems, Meredith's criminal record, the patterns of manipulation. My mother called, screaming about defamation. My father sent emails threatening to sue. Meredith posted a long, rambling Instagram story calling me a liar and a narcissist. It all just made them look worse. Because here's what they didn't understand. I had documentation. I had the medical records from my first life. Yes, somehow they existed in this timeline too, in storage somewhere, waiting to be found. I had emails and texts showing their financial manipulation. I had witnesses, old friends and neighbors who remembered the favoritism, the neglect, the casual cruelty. I didn't engage with them directly. I didn't need to. I had lawyers now, good ones. They sent cease and desist letters. They filed counter threats. They made it clear that if my family wanted to go to court, I would bury them in legal fees and discovery. My family backed down. They had no choice. They had no money, no credibility, no leverage. And I had everything they'd tried to take from me. A year later, I was in Stockholm, accepting a major environmental science award. The prize came with €500,000 and an endowed research position at the institution of my choice. I chose to stay at University of Alaska, with the condition that they'd fund a new Arctic research center. They agreed. I was 31 years old, I had a PhD, multiple awards, 2 best-selling books, and was considered one of the leading experts on Arctic climate science. I'd been named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. I'd testified before Congress 3 times. I lived in a beautiful house in Alaska with my dog, my research, my hard-won peace. And Meredith was still living in my parents' house. Still unemployed, still posting bitter comments on social media about success and privilege and unfairness. My parents had downsized to a small apartment after losing their house to foreclosure. The remortgage for Meredith's legal troubles had been the beginning of their financial collapse. They'd tried to sue me for emotional damages from the documentary. The case was thrown out, and they'd been ordered to pay my legal fees. They were broke, bitter, and alone. All their friends had abandoned them after the documentary. Their extended family wanted nothing to do with them. They had no one but each other. I should have felt guilty. Maybe in another life I would have. But I remembered too much. I remembered dying because of them. I remembered years of manipulation and theft and contempt. I felt nothing but relief that I'd escaped. Sometimes, when I'm in the field, standing on ancient ice that's melting beneath my feet, I think about my first life. About the girl who was too kind, too trusting, too desperate for family love to protect herself. She died so I could live, so I could be smarter, stronger, harder. The irony isn't lost on me that I became an expert on melting ice, learning to recognize the instability beneath my feet, the danger of staying in one place too long, the importance of documenting everything before it disappears. My sister borrowed my sunglasses every summer. Such a small thing, but it was never about the sunglasses. It was about teaching me that some people will always want to take from you. That proximity doesn't equal loyalty. That family can be the most dangerous thing in your life if you let them close enough to hurt you. So after Rebirth, I moved to Alaska. I went where the sun reflects so intensely off ice and snow that unprepared eyes can go blind. Where winter lasts 8 months and summer is brief and precious. Where everything is extreme and harsh and unforgiving. I went where people like my sister would never follow because she'd never survived somewhere that required actual preparation, actual resilience, actual strength. I went where I could finally see clearly, and from here, from this distance, from this hard-won height, I can finally say I'm happy. The documentary ends with me standing on a glacier, my glacier glasses protecting my eyes from the glare. The camera pulls back to show the vast expanse of white, dangerous, beautiful, unforgiving. Some people say I ran away, my voiceover says. I prefer to think I ran toward something, toward truth, toward peace, toward a life where no one can take my sunglasses and claim they're theirs. Meredith borrowed my sunglasses every summer. After Rebirth, I moved to Alaska. She never visited, not even once. And honestly, that's exactly how I wanted it. The screen fades to white. The pure, blinding white of Arctic sun on snow. A white that makes you squint, that makes you grateful for protection, that reminds you some things in nature are too intense to face unprepared. Credits roll. The theater erupts in applause. I sit in the back, my glacier glasses folded in my lap, Ghost's head resting on my feet, and I smile. I won. Not just against my sister, not just against my family. I won against the version of myself who died in that hospital bed, against the girl who kept giving and giving until there was nothing left to take. I won because I learned that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is putting 3,000 miles between yourself and the people who taught you to shrink. I won because I learned that the opposite of family isn't loneliness, it's freedom. And freedom, I've learned, is worth everything. Even if it means spending your summers where sunglasses aren't borrowed, they're survival equipment, where the ice is melting, but I'm finally standing on solid ground, where I can see everything clearly, where no one can ever take my vision from me again.